going to take a few minutes to show you our cellar build. First of all, started out with a big hole in the ground. They did pour a concrete slab. It has a drain in the middle so that any moisture that's coming in is hopefully going right back out. It is a slab with a block wall. You can see lots of dirt. Ended up with lots of dirt that we had to do something with. And here are the supports that are going in right before they pour the roof on. So there's the roof poured, and a little over a month later they came back out and pulled all those supports out and put the door on. That is a, it's not exactly a storm shelter door. I mean, it is a type of storm shelter door, but it's not the FEMA approved one. Here you can see that they are still taking down some of that plywood. And here's the empty room. It is 16 by 16 from outside to outside. At this point we took over. We built a small porch on the front, or poured a concrete porch on the front, and then we used blocks to build a retaining wall and some steps down into it. There's about a 3-foot gap between the cellar wall and the earthen bank there, and that was filled in with gravel, and it also has drainage pipe in it. One of the first things that we noticed, first issue to try to deal with is just keeping the temperature and humidity down in the cellar. We did have vents were put in. There's that one on the bottom, and there's another one on the eastern wall at the top. We just thought with the size of the cellar, we probably needed 2 vents rather than just one. We got some dirt brought in and started piling that up around the sides of the cellar to just try to provide more insulation. And we also sealed the top. There's 3 coats of concrete sealer on the top to try to prevent any water from seeping through the concrete top. And we just continue to pile the dirt up around the outside edges. But even though we're still not even finished with that, but we really didn't notice a big difference in the temperature drop. I know that it needs to be insulated, and certainly that black needs to be covered up because that's absorbing heat. It has been a very hot year this year. The humidity is another problem that we've been dealing with. Humidity in the cellar has stayed up above 90%, which is not going to be great for our canned goods once we can get things down there. So we decided to paint the interior with Drylock, and then hopefully that would keep some of that moisture from seeping into the cellar. If you've never used Drylock, just be aware that it does take a lot of Drylock to cover masonry walls. You can see here that little spot has 2 coats. Everything else just has 1 coat, and that represents a 5-gallon bucket. So we went and bought another 5-gallon bucket so that we could finish the project. And you can see here just a little bit, you can see the moisture on the floor, and it's because it's seeping in between the mortar, or between the brick through the mortar onto the floor. And so we've decided that as soon as the walls are finished, the next step will be to Drylock the floors as well. And our thought is, we know that that's still going to seep in. There's nothing that we can do to prevent that. But if we Drylock the floor, then hopefully the water will run to the drain rather than just soaking into that concrete floor. And then it takes it a really long time to dry back out. So what we started doing to try to figure out where we were gaining most of our heat is we have a thermometer that has a surface temperature function on it. And so we started taking the surface temperature of the floor, the walls, like close to the floor, the walls part way up, the walls at the top, and then the ceiling, to try to determine where we were losing most of our cooler air. And most of our heat was coming through the ceiling, which we really want to keep that uncovered on the top, on the outside if we can, because we want to use that to build a storage building, like a dry storage on. If we can't do that, then we will cover it if that's what we have to do, but our hope is that we won't have to. So our solution there was to put up foam board insulation. This is 2-inch thick foam board that was screwed in with using large washers into the concrete ceiling. And then we also painted the top with a white reflective paint. So here you can see it's just the sealer and that white reflective paint, as well as the foam insulation, made a huge difference. It dropped the temperature in the cellar within a day, probably by 15 to 20 degrees. So that was significant and what allowed us to start putting things in the cellar. We quickly noticed that the shelving we had was not going to be adequate for the amount of stuff that we wanted to store, and as well as utilizing the space in the best way possible. We built these shelves out of some reclaimed lumber and then also some bunk lumber that we purchased. It was rough cut cedar from a local sawmill, and it worked out great. We were really happy with the results. We did experience some problems this winter. Not only did we have one of the hottest summers we've had in a long time, we've also had an extreme cold snap, which most of the country did. We saw temperatures that stayed below zero for a couple of days, and so you saw the ice accumulation there on the door and the north wall. So this is a work in progress. We're just going to continue to monitor and adjust. Everything survived the cold snap, and we'll continue to adjust as we need to.